What happens when love turns to betrayal, and a mother is forced to raise her children alone with the world questioning their very existence? In a small village, a woman's unshakable belief in her family is tested when her husband returns from war only to accuse her of the unimaginable. But as secrets unravel and the truth comes to light, will the family be torn apart forever? Or will fate offer an unexpected twist that no one saw coming? Brace yourself for a journey of heartache, redemption, and a shocking revelation that will change everything. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. In a small quiet village nestled between rolling hills, life moved at a gentle pace. Dusty roads wound their way through the village, and the air was always filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. It was a place where everyone knew everyone else, and the bond of community was as strong as the ties of family. Here, amid the simplicity of life, a young couple had found something extraordinary: love. Ella and Luke had always been inseparable. Their love was the kind people dreamed about, the kind that made others smile when they saw it. In the evenings, they would sit under the stars, sharing stories, dreams, and laughter. Luke would often surprise Ella with little gifts: a wild flower tucked behind her ear or a small trinket carved from the heart of a tree. To Ella, these were more than just gestures. They were the small pieces of a love that seemed unbreakable. Their village watched as their bond grew stronger with each passing year. It was clear to everyone that Luke and Ella were made for each other. Their love was the heartbeat of their community, a reminder of what it meant to be truly connected. Even on the toughest days, they found joy in each other's company, their spirits always lifted by the simple presence of the other. When Ella discovered she was pregnant, it felt like the universe itself was celebrating with them. Tears of joy filled her eyes as Luke held her close, lifting her high into the air as if the entire world belonged to them. "We're going to raise a family," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "A family of love, of laughter and dreams." Ella believed those words with all her heart. She believed in their future, in the life they would build together. But as with all stories, life had other plans. The call for military service came suddenly, a summons that would change everything. Their country was facing rising tensions, and all able-bodied men were required to serve. Luke hesitated, torn between his duty and his love for Ella. But in the end, he promised her he would return. "I'll be back before you know it," he assured her, his rough hand brushing over her growing belly. "We'll raise our family together, just like we always dreamed." Ella clung to his words, holding on to them as though they were the only thing keeping her grounded. As he left, she watched him disappear down the road, her heart heavy but hopeful. They said goodbye with promises of reunion, unaware of the storm that would soon hit their lives. For months, life trudged on slowly. The days passed with the same quiet rhythm, but the distance between Ella and Luke grew wider with each passing letter. His letters came infrequently, and when they did, they were short and full of little more than hastily scribbled lines. "Stay strong," he wrote. "I miss you. I'll be home soon." But soon seemed like an eternity, and soon became a distant hope. During those long months, Ella's belly grew, and so did her dreams. She wrote to Luke often, pouring her heart onto the pages, hoping her words would reach him. She worked odd jobs to make ends meet, cleaning houses, sewing clothes, and gathering water from the well. Each day, she carried the weight of their love and her unborn children, each day feeling more like a test of her strength. When the day came for Ella to give birth, the village midwives came to assist her, as there was no hospital or sterile rooms for miles. Instead, there was the comfort of familiar faces and the warmth of the village's ancient wisdom. It was a simple birth, one that should have been filled with joy, but as soon as the babies arrived, there was an eerie silence. Ella looked down at her children with love, her heart swelling with emotion. But there was something different, something unexpected. Instead of the dark-haired, dark-skinned babies she had imagined, her sons were pale, almost ivory in color. Their wispy hair was a shocking blonde, and their eyes were blue like the deep river pools after the rain. Ella's heart caught in her throat as she looked at them, her love for them instant and fierce, but also filled with confusion. Whispers started almost immediately. Murmurs spread through the village, and the looks from the people she had known her entire life grew colder. They stared at her with suspicion, judging her silently as she held her sons close. Ella couldn't understand what was happening. She had never strayed. She knew, deep down, that these were her children, and that they were also Luke's children. She had to believe it. Luke will understand, she told herself, over and over. He will believe me. He will know these are his sons. But in the village, the whispers only grew louder, and the stares more frequent. Yet, Ella stood tall, refusing to let the judgment of others break her. She raised her sons with love, working tirelessly to provide for them. She told them stories of their father, of how strong and brave he was, and how one day he would return and see them for who they truly were. But deep inside, Ella couldn't shake the growing doubt. Would Luke see past the differences in their children's appearance and accept them as his own? Or would the truth that no one seemed to understand, drive him away? Hook. Little did Ella know, the answers to her questions would soon arrive, but they would come with a shocking twist that would change everything forever. Life had continued without Luke, and with each passing day, the weight of the years bore heavily on Ella's shoulders. Her sons, now 4 years old, were growing strong and curious, always asking about their father. "Where is Papa, Mama?" they would ask, their innocent eyes searching hers for an answer. Ella would smile and tell them stories about their father, painting him as the brave hero who would return and hold them close. But deep down, she could feel the aching emptiness of his absence. The years without Luke had been challenging, to say the least. The village, once full of warm smiles and familiar faces, had become a place where whispers followed her at every turn. People no longer greeted her with the kindness they once did. Instead, there were sidelong glances, murmurs behind her back, and looks of pity. But she held her head high, not letting the coldness of others break her. Her love for her sons and her unwavering belief that Luke would return kept her going. One afternoon, after a long day of scrubbing and cleaning, Ella received a letter, its edges worn and its paper crinkled. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Luke's. Her heart skipped a beat and her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter. "I'm coming home," it read. "I don't know when, but soon. I miss you and the boys." Tears blurred her vision as she read the words over and over. Luke was coming home. After all these years, after all the uncertainty, he was coming back. The feeling of hope, long dormant, surged inside her. She could barely contain her excitement. She ran to her boys who were playing outside and held them close. "Your papa is coming home," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "He's coming home." The days leading up to Luke's return were filled with anticipation. Ella prepared everything. The house was clean, the children were dressed in their best clothes, and Ella herself wore a simple but elegant dress she had saved for this moment. She wanted everything to be perfect for the reunion, for the moment when Luke would finally return and see the family they had built. Even without him, finally, the day came. Ella stood at the edge of their small home, her heart racing as she spotted a figure in the distance. She squinted her eyes and saw him, Luke. He was thinner than before, his face more lined, and his uniform hung loosely around his frame. But it was him. It was her husband, coming back to them. Her heart surged with joy and she took a step forward, her arms open wide, ready to embrace him. As Luke approached, his eyes scanned the crowd of villagers who had gathered to see him return. But then his gaze fell on Ella, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. She smiled at him, her heart overflowing with love and hope. She wanted to run to him, to fall into his arms, but something in his eyes made her pause. There was confusion, disbelief, and something else, something she couldn't place. "Ella," Luke said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "I didn't expect this." His words seemed hesitant, unsure. Ella's smile faltered. She could feel the air around them growing thick with tension. "Malik, these are your sons," Ella said, her voice trembling slightly but filled with conviction. She motioned to the 3 boys standing nervously by her side. They were clutching her skirt tightly, their eyes wide and unsure of what was happening. Ben, Owen, and Charlie, her 3 beautiful sons, all looked up at their father, waiting for him to see them for who they truly were. Luke stepped closer, his brows furrowing as his gaze shifted from Ella to the boys. His expression turned cold. What is this?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper but filled with disbelief. "These are my sons." His words cracked with emotion, but not the kind Ella had hoped for. Instead of warmth, there was a hard edge, a shock that seemed to freeze him in place. Ella's heart sank. "Yes," she said softly, her voice breaking. "These are your sons, Ben, Owen, and Charlie. I've raised them alone, but they are yours, Luke." But Luke wasn't listening. His eyes darted from one child to the next, each of them pale and blonde, their skin a stark contrast to his dark complexion. How can these children be mine?" His voice rose, filled with anger and confusion. "They don't look like me. They don't even look like you." Ella tried to reach for him to explain, but Luke jerked away, his face twisted with disbelief. "You think I'm a fool?" he spat, his words sharp as knives. "While I was out there fighting for my country, you were here with these children. No, I won't believe it." "Malik, please," Ella pleaded, her heart breaking with each word. "Please listen to me. I swear to you, I never betrayed you. I never." But Luke wasn't listening. His mind was clouded with anger, and his pride refused to let him hear the truth. "You humiliate me," he snarled, his voice trembling with rage. "You shame me in front of everyone. I won't raise these bastards." Ella's knees buckled and she dropped to the ground, her arms around her children, shielding them from the storm that was unfolding. "Please, Malik," she sobbed. "Please, for the sake of what we had, don't do this." But Luke had already turned his back, his eyes cold and unforgiving. The villagers who had once celebrated the love between Ella and Luke now stood in silence, their judgmental eyes focused on the broken woman kneeling before them. The chief elder, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward, his face unreadable. "You must leave, Ella," the elder said quietly, his voice full of sorrow. "Before nightfall." Turning point, the decision was made. Ella, her heart shattered, gathered her children close and left the only home they had ever known. The world, once filled with hope and love, now felt like a cold, unforgiving place. Ella's journey from the village she once called home felt like a never-ending road stretching ahead with no end in sight. Her heart ached with each step she took, the weight of the past pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had left behind everything, the life she had dreamed of, the love she had fought for, and the community that had once been her family. Now, all she had were her 3 sons, their tiny hands clutching hers as they walked into an uncertain future. For days they traveled in silence, the dry earth burning their feet and the sun scorching their backs. The boys, despite their young age, never complained. They walked beside her, their eyes downcast, sensing the heavy sadness that surrounded them. At night, when they found a quiet place to rest, Ella would hold them close, whispering stories into their ears to ease their worries. "We are strong," she would tell them softly. "We are survivors. No matter what happens, we have each other." The first few nights were the hardest. They slept under the stars, wrapped in the thin warmth of a single blanket. The wind would howl and the ground was unforgiving, but Ella kept her sons safe, shielded from the cold and the dark. She knew that the road ahead was uncertain, but she also knew that her love for them was stronger than any challenge they might face. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a small town far from the village. It was a place where no one knew them, where no one would judge them for their appearance or their past. The people here were busy with their own lives, too preoccupied to look twice at a single mother and her 3 children. This anonymity was a relief to Ella, who longed for a place where she could start fresh, free from the eyes of those who had once condemned her. Ella found work at a small cafe owned by a kind woman named Mrs. Harper. It wasn't much. A modest room above the cafe, a mattress on the floor, and a small kitchen. But it was a roof over their heads, and for the first time in a long while, Ella felt a glimmer of hope. She washed dishes, cleaned tables, and worked from dawn until dusk, all while caring for her boys. It was hard work, but Ella didn't mind. Every penny she earned went toward providing for her sons, giving them the life she had promised them when they were born. The boys, in turn, grew stronger. Ben, the oldest, was a dreamer, always drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick, his imagination running wild. Owen, ever the protector, stood in front of his brothers when strangers came too close, his eyes sharp and alert. And Charlie, the quiet one, always seemed to know when something was wrong, his thoughtful gaze constantly watching over his family. Though they were all different, each of them carried a strength that reminded Ella of Luke. Years passed, and the boys began to thrive in the town's school. It wasn't an easy life, but they were surrounded by people who cared, and they had each other. Ben's art began to catch the attention of the local community, and by the time he was 8, he had won a regional art competition. Owen, with his natural curiosity, joined the youth robotics club at the school and quickly became one of its brightest members. Charlie, who had always been quiet, shocked everyone with his eloquence when he delivered a speech at a school event that moved even the mayor to tears. Ella couldn't help but feel proud of her sons. Every day they reminded her of how far they had come, and she began to believe that despite the past, they had a future full of promise. She worked harder than ever, putting aside any lingering doubts she had about her ability to provide for them. But as her sons grew, so did her dreams. She wanted more for them than just survival. She wanted them to have the kind of life they deserved. One evening, after putting the boys to bed, Ella found herself staring out the small window of their room, lost in thought. She had always been a survivor, but now she realized that it was time to dream again, to push beyond the limitations she had set for herself. She had always told her sons that they could be anything they wanted, that they could achieve greatness. Now she had to believe that for herself too. Ella enrolled in evening classes at the local community center, studying business management. At first, it was difficult. She had never thought of herself as someone capable of running a business. But as the months went by, she grew more confident. Every night after her long days at the cafe, she would pore over textbooks, teaching herself the concepts she needed to build a better life for her family. Slowly, she began to understand the language of business, and with each passing day, she felt more empowered. 5 years after they had left the village, Ella started a small catering company. It was a modest beginning, but she was proud of what she had achieved. She worked tirelessly, often staying up late into the night preparing meals for local events. As her reputation grew, so did her business. Within 7 years, Ella's catering company had expanded to 3 towns, employing dozens of workers. She had become a successful businesswoman, a far cry from the woman who had once been cast aside by her community. Her sons, too, had flourished. Ben's art was now being showcased in galleries, and Owen's work with robotics had caught the attention of a local tech company, offering him a scholarship for further studies. As time passed, Ella found herself standing at the precipice of something monumental. The quiet, humble woman who had once been forced to flee her home, the woman whose very presence had been condemned, was now a respected business owner. She had built a life for her sons, a life they could be proud of. Her catering company had expanded. Her sons were thriving, and for the first time in many years, Ella felt as though she had gained control over her destiny. But, as life often proves, fate has a way of bringing the past rushing back, and it was about to come knocking once again. It all began with an invitation, a letter she never expected to receive. The regional cultural festival, held annually to celebrate the resilience of the community's heroes, had chosen her as one of the honorees. The letter, signed by the festival organizers, invited her to attend the event and share her story of perseverance. It was a recognition Ella had never imagined, a testament to how far she had come. Her sons, now teenagers, were the first to see the opportunity. "You've earned this, Mom," Ben said, his voice full of pride. "You should go. You deserve it." Ella, hesitated. The thought of returning to the village that had once turned their backs on her filled her with a deep, uncomfortable dread. But her sons, ever supportive, encouraged her to face the past, to let them see who she had become. "Let them see you, Mama," Owen said. "Let them see the woman you are now, the one we're proud of." After much contemplation, Ella agreed. With her sons by her side, she would return. Not as the broken woman who had been cast out, but as someone who had built a new life from the rubble of the past. She dressed in her best clothes, a flowing gown that felt like a symbol of everything she had fought for. Her sons were equally well dressed, standing tall and confident beside her. Ben had his art exhibitions now. Owen was a member of a prestigious robotics team, and Charlie, quiet but brilliant, had delivered speeches at several youth leadership forums. They arrived at the festival grounds, a space filled with colorful tents and the hum of conversation. The crowd was vibrant, full of energy, but as soon as they stepped onto the grounds, something changed. The whispers started, low at first, then rising in volume. Eyes turned towards Ella and her heart began to race. She could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, judging her, remembering the woman they had once abandoned. And then, she saw him. Luke. Malik, he stood at the edge of the crowd, looking older than she remembered, his face worn and lined with regret. His shoulders, once broad and confident, now seemed hunched, weighed down by the passage of time. Ella's breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she wondered if she was seeing things. Could it really be him? After all these years, after everything that had happened. He saw her then, his eyes widening in shock as he took in the sight of her standing before him, her sons by her side. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The years of silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. And then, Luke moved towards her, his feet slow and hesitant, as if unsure of his place in this moment. "Ella," he said, his voice rough as though it had been unused for too long. I didn't know. I was wrong." Ella stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. The years of pain, of doubt, of being judged and abandoned, suddenly rushed back in a flood. But she was different now. Stronger. She had built a life, a future for her sons, and that future was no longer dependent on his approval. "You didn't even ask," she said, her voice calm, steady, but with an undercurrent of emotion. "You judged me, Malik. You humiliated me and you abandoned us." Tears welled up in Luke's eyes. He looked down at the ground, unable to meet her gaze. "I was a fool," he whispered. "I didn't know the truth. When they told me, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see past my pride." Ella's heart softened, but she held her ground. "The truth," she said, her voice tinged with sadness, "is that you didn't want to see it. You didn't want to know. Your sons." There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of distant chatter and the rustle of the festival crowd. Luke stepped closer, his eyes searching her face for forgiveness, but Ella shook her head. "It's too late for that," she said gently. "I forgave you a long time ago, but that doesn't mean my life stops now. It doesn't mean that my sons and I will go back to the way things were. We can never go back." There was a silence between them, heavy with unspoken words and regret. Luke looked up at her, his expression broken. "I lost everything," he whispered, his voice full of grief. "I lost you, and I lost my sons." Ella looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and resolve. "You didn't lose them because of me," she said softly. "You lost them because of yourself, because you refused to see what was in front of you." And then, it happened. The crowd, which had been watching in silence, suddenly gasped. Murmurs spread quickly through the festival grounds. One by one, the elders of the village began to step forward, and their voices echoed through the air. "It's true," one of them said. "His grandfather, he was of mixed descent. We had forgotten. But the truth was there all along." Luke's face drained of color as the revelation hit him like a tidal wave. His grandfather, whom he had never truly known, had carried the same light skin and blonde hair as his sons. The triplets whose existence he had once denied were not some mistake. They were his flesh and blood, his legacy, but it was too late for reconciliation. Ella turned away from him, her heart steady. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "But I will never go back. My life, our lives have moved on." As Ella walked away, her sons beside her, she could feel the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. She had done it. She had overcome everything, not for Luke, but for herself and for her children. The crowd parted for her, and for the first time in many years, Ella felt free. Resolution. As the festival ended, Ella stood beneath a sky filled with fireworks, her son's laughter ringing in her ears. Her past no longer held any power over her. She had become more than what anyone had expected. She had become a queen in her own right, a woman who had faced adversity and emerged stronger than ever before. And as she walked into the future, she knew that nothing could ever break her again.